My name's Gregg Pollack, and this is my Founders Talk. So I've been working on this tech accelerator called Starter Studio here in Orlando, and one of the things we had to do is a founder talk, get founders from the local community to come in and give a talk. And so I had to put together a talk. A couple people were like, Gregg, we want to hear your founder story. So I put something together, then I realized I should probably get it on video because a couple people might find it useful. I'm going to go through and give this talk. We're doing it in one take. There's no editing. So there's going to be screw-ups along the way, some stories. I'll probably be a little long-winded, but hopefully it'll be entertaining. So as you can see here, I call this a story with hats because really, when it comes down to being a founder of a company, it's all about figuring out how to take off the different hats. And I'm going to be giving you 25 lessons, 25 things I learned along the way from when I graduated college to where I got here. And hopefully you'll be able to apply some of these things yourself in your own careers. And this might be just the first of two videos because, as you'll see, this sort of ends with a little bit of code school success, but it doesn't go past there. So let's get into it. So I have a successful friend that I occasionally see at conferences, and he had some good tech success with a company and then went and tried to do his own thing. And see, what he ended up doing is investing in his own startup ideas. I got this great idea. I'll find a couple of developers, designer, go and start making it. And so he would go and he'd invest and they'd go and they'd work on it, but none of them would end up working out. They all pretty much folded. And he started to realize after a while that the reason why they weren't working out is that each of these companies was missing the founder, the person who would be willing to pick up all the slack and do all the stuff that everybody else wasn't doing. The sales, the marketing, staying up until 4 a.m., doing what it takes to put it together. It's that attitude and that drive that really makes a founder of a company, and every startup needs one. You may have worked with startups before that were sort of missing that role, that person who is motivating people, incentivizing people, and doing whatever it takes to get the job done. So it certainly takes a certain personality to do that. And really, you've got to be willing to do everything else that someone isn't doing. And as you're going to see with some of my failures in my career, really they failed because, well, there was hats that I just didn't know how to put on. I didn't know they needed to be put on. So let's jump into it, right? It takes a while to figure out all those hats. So really, I went to Santa Clara University. It was in the middle of San Jose, California. And it was full of lots of people from high school that you were just trying to get away with. It was probably the wrong college for me, but I got a good education, computer engineering major, theater minor. Interesting combination. But from there, I actually did an internship at Electronic Arts. I wanted to do game programming. That's really what I wanted to do for a living. So I did an internship at Electronic Arts, did some customer service, which was a good experience, QA, which was horrible. I just couldn't deal with doing QA because it was just the same thing over and over again. To be honest with you, I spent most of the time in the QA department planning my next trip to Disney World. I have always been a huge fan of Disney, and every few years I would figure out a way to come out to Disney in Orlando. And of course I ended up in Orlando eventually, which is good. If people around the office here knew how much of a Disney fan I am, then well, they'd probably laugh at me. So I fantasized about working at Disney the whole time. It was bad. Graduated, and I was lucky enough to get a job at 3DO. I was working with a sort of production team that was on the Army Men team, and you guys remember this. This was like a console that sort of died. But they also had some games like Portal Runner, which was part of the Army Men series. So I worked on this game. I don't know if any of my final work made it into there, but I basically did some AI and level design. But in this company, the first thing that I learned that sort of has stuck with me over the years is I had a boss that did one-on-ones. And so what that meant is every other week on a Friday, we would take 30 minutes, we would walk out of the office. There was a really nice, I think it was a Redwood City, there was a really nice river we'd go and walk on. And he would take the time to say, how are things going? How are you enjoying what you're doing? How are things with you personally? And just the fact that there was this bond, it was the first time I had a bond between me and a supervisor. I felt like he was somebody I could talk to. And so since then, that's something that I've always tried to do with people that I've worked with, is take the time to make sure you get that dialogue with them. And if you're joining a company, ask them, do you guys do one-on-ones? You know, you're basically asking, am I going to get FaceTime, time to make friends with the people who are supervising me and get my voice heard? Because that's really what people want, right? You want to do good work, but you want somebody to listen. And that's what one-on-ones are great for. So it's something I always try to do. That's lesson number 2, by the way. So when I was working at 3DO, I also, since I graduated college, I was playing a lot of online tournaments. So, Quake, Doom, I would always be gaming. And I'd play in online tournaments. And it was around that time that I learned sort of the tools in Java servlets to build my own tournaments. So I started with something called the Extreme Tournament Gaming League, and that went really well. And I had people that reached out to me that said, hey, that's a cool league you're running. Can I use that code to run my league? I was like, interesting. So I ended up building gaming leagues at gleagues.com, as you see here. Yep, I did the design, and as you can see with that beautiful blue background, I did it all myself. And you can see there's 37 leagues, and actually a little over 6,000 people using this. It was free, it wasn't a paid thing. It could have been, I could have probably run it as a software as a service, but I didn't. So anybody can create their own league and challenge people on a ladder with whatever game that they want to do. And this was the first time, you notice here, sponsored by NVIDIA and D-Link. I was actually able to go to these companies. I think somebody talked me into having the guts to reaching out to like NVIDIA and D-Link and saying, hey, I'm running an online tournament, can you give us some prizes? So every few months I'd be able to give away prizes to the top people in the tournament, and that would attract more people. And I didn't make money off of it, but really what I learned from there is if you have an audience, you probably can make money, either through sponsorships or by charging people. So I think that's also why you see companies like, the Twitter and the Facebooks of the world and other companies, although those guys are making money now, but that's part of the reason why you see companies just focusing first on bringing an audience. Because if you can bring an audience and you get a couple, tens or hundreds of thousands of people using your service, you can probably then figure out a way to monetize. There's going to be a way to do it. So gaming leagues, sort of the epitome of running gaming leagues, and the pinnacle was when I had a booth at E3. This was the yearly gaming convention, which I don't think is anymore, because at one point they made it so that it was only for game developers, not for the public. But I had a booth there for gaming leagues, and we marketed it, did the whole thing, but I was never really good at following up. And that's pretty much why gaming leagues failed. Really, as a developer, I didn't understand what it took to sell and to market and how to do that properly. I probably should have looked for a co-founder or at least dug more into it. But that's pretty much why it failed, is because I didn't know how to sell it. So I moved down to San Diego with a girl from Santa Clara. Tried to work on gaming leagues. It wasn't working out. And ended up finding out that the CTO of MP3.com used to go to Santa Clara. So I used my alumni association, which is always a good resource if you have a hard time finding a job, your alumni association. And so I ended up getting a job in the data warehousing department of MP3.com. And that's also where I learned Perl, really Perl hackery and command line stuff like awk and grep. The other thing I learned is be careful about joining companies after they've been acquired. Acquisitions don't always go well the year or two after they happen. Sometimes there are layoffs. Sometimes they make people move. Sometimes the thought leadership leaves the company, especially if you're not joining a company that has lots of momentum forward and you're not a key part of that. So keep that in mind. Also, as a developer, there are limited ways for you as a software developer or designer or creative to make a lot of money. But one of them in this day and age is to join a real risky tech startup. So if you're young and you don't have 2 kids to feed and you don't mind working for even, say, equity, it's a good opportunity to find a tech startup that you believe in and join them and try to ride them through what could potentially be an acquisition. Unfortunately for me, in this case, it wasn't a great place to be right after their acquisition. I put this in here because it's a fun story. So everybody has a story. Every developer has a story about something that went horribly wrong and it was all their fault. And well, mine comes about here. So I was working in the data warehouse department and I would code up. A lot of the times they would send me big SQL data dumps from other companies or other record labels, and it was my job to clean it and import it into the live database. And sometimes that involved, querying to see if the email already exists, and if it exists, then just add more whitelist entries, add more mailing list subscriptions. So it was a Friday. I remember it was a Friday, and I had about 150,000 emails to subscribe to certain mailing lists. So I wrote up my little Perl script and realized with that many records it was going to take over the weekend to run. It was going to take a couple hours. So I was like, cool, I'll write it up, run it. I'll check in on it tomorrow on Saturday, make sure it's run, all that sort of stuff. So I write it up. Before I leave work, I execute the program, go home. Cool. Saturday afternoon / evening, I check on it, log in remotely, check to see if the program's run, and it doesn't look like it's run. Look in the database, no subscriptions. Weird. Maybe something weird happened when I logged off from work on Friday. I'll go ahead and run it again. So I go ahead and run it again and sign off, and then come in on Monday. First thing Monday morning, we have our little Monday morning stand-up. We go into the office, gather around a table, and my boss at the time goes, so the database guys, they've been here all weekend. Apparently, somebody ran a script on Friday, which updated 150 million records. That's every single record in the email database. So blew away all the emails. So the database guys had to come in on Saturday, and they spent the whole day going from a backup. So we basically lost 2 weeks worth of subscriptions. We do backups, but we lost, so they had spent all day upgrading it and it was all back to normal. Then they went home. Saturday night, the script ran again. Blew away all 150 million records again. So database guys came back on Sunday, did it all over again. So they've been here all weekend and they're not very happy. Does anybody care to tell me what happened? And I'm just sitting like, no, shit, it can't be me. I was like, no way. I write good code. I was just like praying. I was like, I was updating, right? I was just doing quick. I was just updating stuff. How could it possibly be me? So I go back to my desk. I'm like, please don't be me. Please don't be me. I open up the script that I wrote and instead, I saw the SQL statement. Instead of a where, I wrote an and. So it was update table, set email blah. Instead of where blah and blah, it was and blah and blah. So it went through and just blew away everything. So needless to say, that was probably the beginning of the end for me at mp3.com. From then point on, they just had made it, so Gregg, whenever you run a query, you need to run it by a few people. They did have a few layoffs after that because, well, they got acquired, and then the people that acquired them starting to realize that they weren't profitable enough to support all the employees. But I did start looking for other gigs. And I started learning this new, exciting programming language on the market called Java. Even got a Java certification. Ended up getting a job for a defense contractor in San Diego, got married in San Diego, moved to Orlando. And So I got to Orlando, and I figured I wasn't going to be able to work for the defense contractor. When I left, I was like, hey, moving to Orlando, life change. I figure I probably won't have a job here anymore, right? And they said, well, you can work remote. I was like, great, we can work remote. So I got married, did the honeymoon, moved to Orlando, called them up, said, hey, I'm ready to work. And they said, hey, that's great. We really need somebody in Washington, D.C. I was like, wait, you told me I could work remote. I just moved to Orlando. I'm ready for work. And they said, yeah, that's great, but we really need somebody in Washington, D.C. It's like, so okay, so I guess you're telling me I don't have a job anymore. So I ended up not having a job. I was like, great, what do I do now? Well, when I was at mp3.com, they had a really good homegrown project management system. It was just the best I had ever seen. So I was like, well, I could probably program this. So I created OnTask, a project management solution. Every developer at some point in their career will undoubtedly create their own project management solution. So I decided, let's get it out of the way. So, it's the whole scratch your own itch thing. So I created it and actually had one or two companies playing around with it. But again, I didn't know how to do sales and marketing. And really, I was creating a product that I would use, and I didn't do the customer validation that I should have done. I should have found companies that were going to buy it from me once I made it, collected requirements from those companies so that I could be working along the way to their specifications. So that's another lesson here, is just because you would use and pay for a product doesn't mean anybody else will. I've seen this over and over again, even with a tech accelerator, that people design products for themselves. They solve a problem for themselves, and they ignore the fact that they should probably find 10 other people at 10 other companies that would hopefully pay for the product, so that when they complete the product, they'll have customers, and they can talk to their customers and get feedback as they're building it, so what they end up building is something that they actually want and will pay for. So OnTask was pretty much a failure. Around that same time, though, I went to a No Fluff Just Stuff conference. It's a Java symposium that travels around the world. And there I found Dave Thomas. Dave Thomas was preaching to a bunch of Java developers about this new technology called Ruby and Ruby on Rails. And I remember very distinctly him showing how easy it is to get a website up and running with Rails, do some scaffolding commands, and poof, you have a website. I also remember looking around the room and seeing the jaws of all of the Java developers on the floor. Like, how could it possibly be that easy? So I was really impressed with Rails. So I really started diving into Rails. And what was great about this book, Agile Web Development with Rails, is that not only does it introduce you to Rails, it introduces you to a way of doing consulting and how to work with a client to come up with wireframes, build it out, communicate effectively. So I have a lot of thanks for this book and Dave Thomas, who wrote it. So I kind of took that model and said, hey, maybe I can start doing consulting. So I created Patch Software. Again, this is my beautiful design work, as you can see. It's actually not half bad for, probably was it 10 years ago? No, not that long. It's probably 8 years ago. So I put together Patch Software. Patched was an old handle of mine. I patched. Ask me about it sometime. And so it's Patch Software. Not the software we created was patched. It was just the nickname, but it worked out anyways. So put together that website, but how did I get clients? Well, most businesses are built in networking groups. If you live in a city, odds are any given day, there's at least 3 or 4 small business networking groups going on. And if you have a small business and you want to drum up business, you go to them. You go to them and you meet other businesses. And if you want to be effective, your first priority when you go to these is to make friends. So I started going to these, making friends, collecting business cards, helping other people. Because if you help other people get business, they'll help you get business. So I would probably go to at least 1 or 2 networking groups a day. Also, my wife would do the same thing. She would go out and go to networking groups that I didn't have time to go. And sure enough, I found clients through there. I found small-time clients. I would pay them, they would pay me like, I started out, my first gig was 25 bucks an hour doing Rails. Did I tell the clients that I was using Rails? Did I market myself as using Rails? No. I market myself as a web developer. I build web applications, and this is the technology that I use. Did I give them a choice? No, I said there's this new language, or, it's going to save you money, write less code to get more done, and I'll be here to support you. So I started following the model, the Agile Development with Rails, I started doing consulting work. At the time, there wasn't that many consultancies advertising that they did Ruby on Rails. And I was able to get my company name on a list. I think it was on a wiki off of the Ruby on Rails website that had a list of all the different companies. And I was able to get on there pretty early towards the top of the list. And I did get a lot of leads through there. Just having my name on a list of businesses that did Rails consulting. If I would have invested in some AdWords, it probably would have done pretty well as well. So started building that. And also at the same time, I was going to the different users groups here in Orlando, Java users group, Adobe users group, which isn't around anymore, Cold Fusion users group, which isn't around anymore. But I'd go to all these different users groups, and I took a lesson from them and created the Ruby users group. It started out with maybe like 4 to 6 people every month, pretty small. And a lot of times I would end up doing presentations on things. We'd have other people. But eventually it started growing. And out of there, I sort of met lots of other people that were doing Ruby, which was great. So Patch Software, you could say the consultancy was successful. I was able to make enough money probably after about 3 or 4 months to support myself and my family. And that leads me to bringing on my first contractor. So I met a guy through the Ruby users group who wasn't programming Ruby but wanted to, and brought him on as a contractor with some of my gigs. That was the first time that I had that experience of working with somebody. And he bought a really cool domain. It was called railsenvy.com. And we were like, hey, that's Rails Envy. I think the slogan was, it's not the size of the app that matters, it's how you code it. Get it there? And with Rails, obviously at the time especially, everybody was sort of envious at how Ruby on Rails did things because, again, less code to get more done. So we decided to create a blog, railsenvy.com. And on there we started to sort of imitate some of the popular bloggers that we had respect for. And also, as we were learning, since Rails was a new language, there was a lot of gaps in knowledge. So we would identify the gaps in knowledge, and I put together a blog post. This is the Ruby on Rails caching tutorial. As you can see, this is back when we only had 363 readers. But that really blew up, I think, after this tutorial. And man, when I would create a tutorial, I would go all out. This is just a blog post, but even the blog post has a table of contents. I put images in there, try to make it entertaining, try to tell a story. And so we got on Dig. Remember Dig? We got like lots of hits on Dig and a lot of blog subscribers, and it went really well. Now I've got this lesson number 10, and this kind of sounds wrong, but writing is 50% writing, 50% self-promotion. And the reason, what I mean by that is when you create good educational content, you need to promote yourself, and you need to give yourself time to promote yourself. That's simply how you build an audience, how people find out about you. So every time we would write a blog post, we would do things like submit it to Dig, submit it to Reddit. We would go and we would email all the other popular bloggers we had respect for, and we would say something like this: love your blog. That one blog post you wrote that one time, that helped me out so much. Thank you for what you're doing. By the way, I just put up a blog post on Rails caching. I would love to get your feedback, and well, we linked to your blog on the sidebar of our blog. If there's any way that you can, help us promote it, that would be awesome, not required. A lot of these people creating content seldom get the feedback and the positive reinforcement they deserve. So by giving them that, you're giving them some validation, sending them a nice, honest email, they might help you out. You might establish a relationship. So, and of course these days, you tweet about it, you put it on Facebook, get other people to know about it, encourage people to subscribe, all that sort of stuff. But you got to do self-promotion. You can't just create content and just put it out there. You got to do self-promotion. So me and Jason worked really good together. Jason was the contractor, and I thought, well, I'd want to be part of somebody that I worked for. So why don't me and Jason become partners? Because, well, we work so well together, and I'd want to be a partner, so I should make him a partner. And that didn't turn out so well in the long run. And looking back at it, I kind of learned you don't have to give somebody equity unless they want it. So I made a partnership with the contractor, but I don't think he necessarily wanted it. I'm sure he appreciated it, but I could have hired him as an employee and kept on working under Patch Software, and he would have been fine. But I felt some need to sort of, let's be partners. It felt like the right thing to do because I'm a very fair person. That's a core value for me personally. I felt like that was the right thing to do. But looking back at it, I kind of feel like it wasn't the right thing to do. And we'll get into that a little bit later. So we ended up turning Rails Envy, as you can see, into a company. So home, company, portfolio, speaking, right? And I got so much positive feedback putting out educational content that I did more of it. And I would do Ruby users groups talks, and I would get somebody to video the talk, and then I would sort of do a little bit of editing, and I'd put it up on the blog. And since, again, Rails was such a new thing, these blogs would just get tons of hits. I get tons of traffic. I still get people occasionally email me for this presentation because it really was about how to start learning to do testing. We also started the Rails Envy podcast. Both Jason and I were big podcast fans, Radiolab, This American Life. So, let's try creating our own podcast. So all we would do is we'd go out and find the most popular Ruby articles for the week. We would script it up because I'm just not a talker. I'm bad at being not scripted. So we just went ahead and this was a blog post, and as you can see, people could subscribe on iTunes. We even found a sponsor for the podcast. So our blog was popular enough that we were like, hey, we should be able to find sponsors as well. So what did we do? We thought about, okay, who wants to get in front of our audience? Who wants to get in front of Ruby or Rails developers? And we go to them and say, hey, we've got a podcast, this many listeners. Would you like to sponsor the show? So since we began it, we always had a sponsor, which pretty much, we broke even, right? We're not making money off of this. We're just breaking even on our time that we spend doing it. Which brings me to number 12, reuse all content often. So notice this is a blog post with links. But there's also a podcast version. We didn't do just, get to us on iTunes and publish there on iTunes. We also had a blog. So a lot of people would either just subscribe to the blog or the podcast. Some people would even do both. But looking back on that, what we should have done is not only done a blog post and a podcast on iTunes, we should have also made it a mailing list. I mean, just look at that content, right? I'm sure people would subscribe to get this in their email inbox. Right? Don't be afraid of reusing content. Take content, put it in different forms, in video form, in text form, in podcast form, and publish them all. Don't worry that it's the same content. People like learning in different ways. Some people like learning in multiple ways. Some of them will do both. So the more often you can use content that you create, the better. It was around this time that we were sitting at a Ruby users group and just, shooting the shit. And I started wondering, and this was just around the time that the Apple versus PC commercials came out, what would it be like if we took that format of Mac versus PC and applied that to Ruby on Rails versus other technologies, because Ruby on Rails is the new hotness and everything else is looking a little old and busted. So I ended up writing up the script. Jason provided amazing comic relief. The guy just has comedy in his blood. And we had a friend who was a film student, not using his degree. We went over to his house and we shot some video. And I'm going to let you watch the first Ruby on Rails versus Java video. Hi, I'm Ruby on Rails.
And I'm Java.
What do you got there, Java?
Oh, I was just getting my jars together for my full stack web development framework. Got some Java Bean, Spring, Tapestry, Hibernate.
Wow, pretty thorough.
Well, yeah, I just gotta get all that together, edit a few hundred lines of XML configuration, and compile it all. Then I'll be ready to go.
Wow, that's a lot of stuff.
Well, I don't like to brag, but I am an enterprise-class web development framework. Don't you have to do all that stuff?
Actually, Ruby on Rails is a full stack web framework out of the box, so I can just jump right into creating websites.
You mean no jars?
No jars. What is this?
Nothing. It's not anything. It's mine. It's a standard jar. It's nothing.
So we posted that first video to the blog and it went viral. As you can see here, it's like 584,000 views. That's just recently. So, you know, it just blew up in a lot of different ways. And we created 4 videos. So what we decided to do is one video every day leading up to RailsConf, the big conference for Rails developers. So we did the first one, second one the second day, third one the third day. Realized that every day we were getting more and more RSS feed subscribers because people wanted to see the next video. Also, I realized, I went to a conference like a few months prior at this point where they played a video before the keynotes, and it was just really to quiet everybody down. And I was like, how cool would it be if we got them to play this videos at RailsConf coming up? I was like, what are the odds of that? But what the hell? So I emailed Chad Fowler, who I didn't know at the time, who ran RailsConf, sent him an email, just like, hey, coming to RailsConf, really excited. I don't know if you've seen these videos that we put up, but if you're interested, I can bring, a DVD if you're interested in playing them sometime during the conference, like maybe, before a talk. He emailed back, great idea, bring a DVD. That would be cool. Right, so we went to RailsConf and it was awesome. So they played the first video before the first keynote, second video before the second keynote, and it was cool. It was like free marketing. It gave us tons of brand recognition, crazy good brand recognition, and we didn't have to pay for any of it. Also, what I really liked about it is that as a developer in a group of developers, introverts, people who might be shy, it was always tough to introduce yourself at these conferences and meet new people. But what I liked about it is people would walk the halls and think, hey, you're the guy. And I could be immediately like, yeah, hi, I'm Greg, what's your name? So it was a great way to break the ice and meet a lot of people, which was great. So that was really cool. And of course, since we did it once, what we ended up doing is every next year we would email, hey, we got more videos. If we produce more videos, can you play them? So we would end up premiering the videos at the conference. People would start looking forward to seeing more of these videos, and we'd launch them online at the same time. It was a whole lot of fun. Right, so a lesson learned here is pay professionals when it matters. So if I would have tried to record this video, these commercials, myself, it wouldn't have been nearly as good. But the fact that we knew a guy, we knew this film guy, and we paid him some money to basically do the films, it was great. So pay people professionally when it matters. You're good. We'll come get you, Matt, when we need you. We're filming something else after this. So let me continue. So I started to get into educational video and going to all these different conferences. I went and spoke at a bunch of conferences and realized all these people were going and doing conference talks, and all the stuff that they would do, all the meat and potatoes, all their conference talks wouldn't get filmed, and all this knowledge would go to waste. Some conferences still do this. They don't video the talk. So somebody might work on a talk for a month, putting together an amazing technical presentation, and then never use it again. Never make it out into the public. So because of this, I realized, well, maybe there's something that I can do to sort of capture this information. So what I started doing is I started carrying around a flip camera, and I would go around to conferences, and I was usually speaking at all these conferences, so I had access to the speaker room. I go around to every speaker with my flip and say, hey, can I get you to give me your name, the name of your talk, and give me your talk in 30 seconds. So I get them to quickly summarize the moral of the story. And then what I would do, as you can see here, is I would link them and link their talk and their slides. So I was providing this value not only to these people, because of course I would follow up after the conference and say, hey, thanks for taking the time to do 30 seconds. My video is up. Please take a look and tell your friends. But also I would talk to the conference organizers and say, hey, this video, can you help me promote? And they would help me promote it, right? So number 14 here, provide value to others and it'll come back to you. So I was providing value for both the speakers at the conference, because I would got out word about their conference talk, and very often I would link off to their slides. And I would also give value to the conferences themselves. Eventually, I got to a point where I could pretty much get a free ticket to a conference if I agreed to do it. So, hey, I'm going to go to this conference. Can I get a free ticket and I'll do this video? And they would say, sure. They give press free video all the time, free tickets all the time. So value to others and it'll come back to you. And I guess that's what we were really doing with the blog and the podcast in the first place, just putting out a lot of value and building the audience. So I had started building an audience, and I was putting out some of the videos, and I said, okay, let me see if there's any way I can monetize it. So I created EnvyCasts, where we had a couple of videos. We basically ended up 3 videos in here: scaling Ruby, Ruby on Rails 2.2, advanced active record, and we would charge $9 because that was the standard here. And it was doing pretty well. I mean, it wasn't making enough money to live off of. Maybe if I would have gotten up to maybe the 10 video range, it could have gotten there. But this was sort of, my first foray into online, purchase learning, so video learning. So it went pretty good. But like I said, it was sort of side money. It was good. So that, I guess you could say, as a business worked, although we never put enough work into it for it to be completely self-sustaining or be able to work on it full time. But I also loved creating free content as well. So remember in the very beginning when I talked about gaming leagues and how I would get sponsors for that? I realized also I could get sponsors for producing educational video content. So the first big example of that was New Relic. I was out in San Francisco for a conference, met with the guys in New Relic. They wanted to do more educational stuff. And I said, well, hey, I just did this scaling Ruby talk. I think I might want to do a scaling Rails talk as well, and maybe split it up into a bunch of screencasts. If you want to sponsor it, we can post them on your website. And they had a website at the time that was for teaching developers. And they were like, sure, let's do that. Sounds great. So I got enough money from them to basically pay to create these. It covered my costs. It wasn't a profit. I just covered my costs to create these. So it was the Scaling Rails screencast series. I produced a bunch of these, along with some, of course, screencasts showing how to use New Relic. But they went really well. They got really popular. More than 1,200 views, as it says here. This is just where you can find the videos now, because the original website went down. New Relic took it down, so I put them on YouTube. They're a little bit outdated, but still really useful. Cool. So then I actually I realized, I was doing more to help the Rails community, getting more involved with the Rails core team that was building Rails, and even at one point asked if I could, hey, can I post maybe some useful educational blog entries to the official Rails blog? And they knew me, so they, at that point, because I'd seen them at conferences, so of course they said yes. All I had to do was ask, can I help blog post, guest post on here? And I said, sure, no problem. And here, again, so in the lesson number 15, find who has your audience and give them value. So I was sort of building an audience, building a brand without really knowing about it, doing the videos and stuff like that, and I realized I can get a bigger audience by going to who has my audience and giving them value, posting stuff on the Rails blog about educational stuff for Rails. I think I also would end up like every year post, or maybe every 6 months, posting a list of all the Ruby and Rails conferences on the blog. So it was just about looking at their blog, thinking what would be good to post on here that they're not doing, and simply offering to do that for them. So I would occasionally post a summary of, links that I would get from the podcast. Right, hey, here's a bunch of really good Ruby Rails resources. And of course, at the very bottom, I would say, if you want to listen to this, go over to the Rails Envy podcast. Yeah, cool. So at this point in time, we were doing contracting. It was still me and Jason doing contracting. And we were approached because of sort of all the educational stuff we've been putting out by a company out of the Bay Area, out of San Francisco, saying, hey, you guys, obviously look like you know what you're doing. Can we hire you guys full time? And we were really flattered. Nobody had offered us, decently paying gigs out of nowhere. Usually we had to apply for jobs, right? Nobody had ever come to us and said, we want to hire you. So it was very flattering. And we, of course, were like, yeah, sure, that sounds good. So we ended up joining this company. During the time we were in this company, we created more videos and we kind of branched out a little bit. We created these MVC public service announcements, different style from the Rails Versus commercials, which I think we created like 12 Rails Versus commercials. These I think we created like 6. I'm gonna let you view one of these because I think they're pretty funny.
M is for model, V is for view, C is for controller, and together this framework works better for you.
Hey, what are you doing?
Just having a cookie?
Oh man. Hey, View, come on in here.
Please don't get him into this.
Controller's been sneaking cookies again.
Controller, we talked about this last week. This is why you can't have nice things.
You trying to starve me?
Look, you were telling me that your methods are starting to feel a little flabby and that you'd love to shed a few hundred lines of code.
Do you think I need to lose some code?
Oh, I mean, I'm not saying you do, I'm not saying you don't, but we're not in beta anymore.
Sure enough.
Mm-hmm. Hi. I vaguely resemble TV's Burt Reynolds, which sort of makes me an authority. Controller obesity is an epidemic that can affect 1 out of every 5 applications. Take time today to help your controller lose weight. It just might save your application's lifespan by 10 years or more.
How come he gets to get everything he wants?
Look, I know it's unfair, but given contemporary body ideals, society expects every application to have a skinny controller and a fat mom.
What?
It's so good. I want to pour the whole jar into my face.
The full-time gig, I always got to work with Jason and Thomas Meeks and Tyler Hunt, some really talented people, but it was working on a project that no one was passionate about. It was basically a review site for rich people. They could review jets. They could review vacation homes. And the way the company made money is they would say, get our vacation home guide PDF, just fill out your information. And then they would follow up with these people, give them a call, and sell these leads to other companies. And really, none of us could possibly be passionate about this. So if I could give a developer any advice, right, it's not only look for a good work environment, but try to find yourself in an industry that you can get excited about. I mean, that's why I'm working on Code School full-time right now, is that, man, I am really passionate about education. I love creating really efficient educational quality, content. And so I try to find other people to work with on Code School that have that in them. Not everybody has that. Not everybody has, gets positive and good vibes from creating educational content. Some people want to create video games. Some people want to produce movies, right? So try to find an industry you're passionate about, because this job, none of us were passionate about it, and it was hard to get excited about the work. Also, it was around this time that I learned the partner lesson. Through a series of unfortunate events, I ended up sort of going different ways with Jason. We ended up with a few bad disagreements, miscommunication. I ended up feeling like there was some unreliability a lot of the time, and I felt like I was pulling most of the weight. So I was like, well, because at that point in time, I started working with other contractors, and probably should have talked with Jason. Admittedly, the whole situation was kind of crappy. So, but I wanted to, we had built this brand together. We built Rails Envy together, and I just kept on working under Rails Envy because that was the brand. And he eventually came to me and said, dude, you've got to create another brand. Which at the time, I was like, why? I don't want to do it. Well, I helped build it. I created all this content. So that was really a big bummer, but I decided to just do it, and I'm really happy that I did. So it was good advice, hard to swallow at the time. But really, again, it was like, I look back at it and I go, I didn't need to make him a partner. And I think that's what I learned. I could have retained control and not made him a 50-50 partner, and I would still be working under Rails Envy. So yeah, everybody learns that partner lesson. Make sure that you find good partners, because, there's so many bad stories out there when you work with business partners. So, Envy Labs. So, some of the guys from that company that nobody was passionate about, Thomas Meeks, Tyler Hunt, we all got together and we created Envy Labs. We were all contractors at the time, but we were like, well, wonder what would happen if we all worked in the same office and tried to eventually work under the same brand. So, really, we sort of grew from there and started being consultants. And really, when it comes down to it, as creative professionals, being a consultant is a good way to build a company. You get to surround yourself with other professionals like yourself and practice building products for other people. If you want to build your own products, right? Building your own products is kind of easy. You're scratching your own itch. What's more difficult is actually building other people's products. If you can get good at that, talking with people, listening to requirements, crafting it into a beautiful piece of art, website or web application or whatnot, then you are polishing your chops for maybe someday building a product. But consulting is a good way to start. Also at this point, I learned this lesson because, well, inevitably when you're building a business, you end up hiring people that don't end up staying with you. And certainly looking back, hindsight's 2020, you can see those people, and I can see people that we ended up hiring on that we should have let go a lot quicker than we did. We ended up going through 2 designers before we found the third. We finally found Jason Van Loo, who was the first designer we met, who was as passionate at design and branding as we were about doing software development. Got really lucky in that respect. But of course, hire slow, fire fast. But spend the time to get to know people before you end up hiring them. And when you see signs that they might not be the good fit, try to get rid of them sooner than later. Doesn't sound very compassionate, does it? So, next up. So I kept on producing more videos. For these, I went to the Rails core team that work on Rails, the open source team, and said, hey, I know you guys are coming out with Rails 3. I was thinking maybe I could produce a couple of videos to come out when it gets released. I'd like to do that. And would it be okay if the videos I produce are actually on the Rails homepage? Can I create something you'd be proud enough to put it on the homepage? And in order to pay for this, are you okay if I go out and I raise a little bit of money from sponsorship to actually do it? And they said, yeah, sure, go ahead. So I ended up creating a bunch of videos that I then sort of debuted at RailsConf. I got to go on stage and announce them, which was really great. Again, free content, put it out there for the community. I realized with Rails 3 that it was more advanced material. I needed to create something more beginner. There was sort of a lack of beginner resources around where Rails 3 came out. So I went back and created Rails for Zombies, which this is the new skin. It used to look different. Rails for Zombies wasn't sponsored initially. You see, sponsored by New Relic. We just put it out there, again, just for the community. It was videos combined with code challenges, and we put it out there just as another free thing for the community. The guys over on, the core team was nice enough to let us put it as the first link. When you go to the Ruby on Rails website and you click on screencast, you see Rails for Zombies as the first thing on there. That wouldn't have happened if we wouldn't have been working with the core team and creating something that they would be proud of. And as you can see down below here, we've got Rails 4 Zombie Outlaws. So we sort of continued the trend. As we've grown, we'll go back and we'll create videos and we'll put them out there for free. Lesson number 18. So it was around this time when we released Rails for Zombies that I was approached by a tech publisher. I was talking to them, and I knew them through the conferences, and they said, hey, Greg, we saw Rails for Zombies, and well, every time we talk about the future of online learning around our company, Rails for Zombies always comes up. I was like, wow, that's crazy. They said, well, can we pay you to create more of these courses in other languages? And I was like, pay us. You want to pay us to create more courses? We're having tons of people visiting this. Maybe we should just create some of our own courses and charge for them this time. People seem to love to be learning in this format. Maybe we should just create more and charge for them. I had the experience with EnvyCast, so I kind of knew that was possible. So we released Code School in March 2011, I believe. And with one course, Rails Best Practices, which in hindsight should have been Rails for Zombies 2. It should not have been Rails Best Practices. But that's the direction we went. And we charged $45, made it look like it's on sale. Because, well, everybody likes to buy stuff on sale. I don't think it was ever at $75. But we also, so we did Rails Best Practices, created Code School, and we launched more courses. Eventually we got to a point where we had enough courses that we could then go and do $25 a month. But the funny thing is, I realized recently, we had a lot of guts. We only had 3 paid courses. And with 3 paid courses, we put out a recurring model with 3. $25 a month gets you access to 3. But we also told people we were going to try to release 1 course a month on top of that. So, and we went down that road, but hopefully what you see from this is that you don't have to have that much content to start doing the recurring revenue model. Also, what we learned here is don't over-engineer. With Code School, that was our first product, and we were like, yeah, we're going to be creating a lot of products. So why don't we build our own billing system, and we'll have each of these products interface with this one billing system. Kind of like 37 Signals in Basecamp. That's what they kind of did. They had one central billing system, and we want to do that. Let's do that. It'll be a service. Have we ever used our billing system 2 years later, 2.5 years later? Have we ever used our billing system for more than Code School? What do you think? No, we haven't done it. And I definitely look at that as a over-engineering feat. This was in the very beginning days before there was like Chargeify and Stripe. So you know what we're doing right now? Thomas Meeks is in the other room right now figuring out how to completely ditch our billing system and throw away that code and replace it with Stripe. Yeah, we thought it was a good idea, it wasn't. So the other lesson we learned here, unfortunately, or fortunately, is that spam, it works. Because we had all these people that joined Rails for Zombies, we put out our subscription model, and we're like, okay, put out a subscription model, let's go ahead and pull all our emails. maybe people won't think it's too bad, and we'll just let everybody know. We'll send out an email. And so we took our maybe 10,000 emails at the time and sent out an email. And we were just amazed at how effective sending out emails are. And they just are. Mailing lists are really valuable. And as you can see, I'm happy and sad about that at the same time, because spam, it works. You try to be respectful though. Send out a newsletter, let people know about stuff you think they'll be interested in, but that's what you do. You've got to send people more email. I know you've got more than enough email in your email box, you don't need any more, but well, if you're a business, you kind of just have to do it. Also, over-deliver to your customers. That's one thing that we try to do with Code School a lot. What does that mean? That means on the surface, if you go and you look around at sort of the website on the outside of Code School, and it says we do this, we do X, Y, and Z, it's not going to give you a full picture. When you join and you start trying a course, we're going to delight you. We're going to over-deliver. We're going to have a few extra features that you're going to really like that we didn't even tell you about. You're not going to expect them. They're going to delight you. If you can do this with a product and give your customers more than they expect, well, they're going to become fans. 22, no one's competition in a growing market. I refuse to look at anybody as competition, especially in the tech education space. I feel like the market is still really young. So why look at anybody as competition? If you think someone's competition, you're not trying hard enough to figure out how you can work together and maybe do cross-promotion. When it comes to education in particular, people don't just pick up one book to learn a topic. I couldn't hand you one book on Ruby development and you'd be great to go. People use multiple services. That's not just true in the education space. So, I know a lot of people that have subscriptions to both Treehouse and Code School, and that's perfectly fine. They're going to use them both. Number 23, advertise about each new feature. So this could be through a mailing list, could be on your website, but people love to hear about new things that you implement. If they're fans already, it's going to make them even more of a fan. Also, don't be afraid of giving it away. So every year now, we do the Code School free weekend. And we were really afraid of that when we first did it. It's basically, you can give us your email address, we'll let you know, we'll give you a whole free weekend on Code School. And we were really afraid of doing that at first. We're like, great, are we going to piss off our existing customers? Are people not going to subscribe? But we sort of went ahead and did it. Not only that, but we found a sponsor. We said, okay, how much would you be willing to pay us for everybody who gives us their email address? And so we put up a splash page that says, I think it was CloudSpokes was the first one. CloudSpokes wants to buy you a free weekend on Code School. Put in your email here. And of course, made it clear that you're subscribing to both mailing lists, theirs and ours. And then we had the free weekend and, crossed our fingers. Tons of people played through courses. And the funniest thing happened. First of all, leading up to the weekend, we got more subscribers. How did that happen? Well, it turns out that what we did is when you put in your email to sign up for the free weekend, the next page would say, don't let your friends miss out. Click here to let them know about the free weekend, so they'd promote. And it also said, hey, if you want to get a head start, here are some free Code School courses that you can get started on right now. So people would go play the free courses and subscribe anyways. Just because they would see that hopefully what they saw was the value that we bring and they wanted to keep on playing. Then during the weekend, we would do the upsell. So we would say, hey, don't interrupt your learning. Subscribe right now for $9 for your first month. So people would subscribe there. And then following the weekend, we would follow up and say, here's how you did on your free weekend. Last chance, subscribe for $9 to keep on learning and finish these courses. So what ended up happening is we got paid for the sponsor, and we also gained something like 600 new subscribers. So we got paid for subscribers. If you can figure out a business where you get paid to acquire customers, then you're going to do really well. Unfortunately, with Free Weekend, we can only do it once a year. But we do it because it works. It's a really good marketing promotion thing. It's very comparable to like HBO and Showtime, right? HBO and Showtime have those free weeks where it's free for everybody. And it does well for them. It's kind of similar to that. So don't be afraid of giving it away. Also, we did a big Kickstarter program for our Try iOS to kick off a new framework. We realized it was going to cost a lot of money to design the technology we wanted to do it effectively, so we put up a Kickstarter. And we did better than we ever could have possibly imagined. So you can see here we pledged, our goal was 50,000, we had 152,000. Now, I honestly thought it was going to take about 100 grand to create that first course, and it took about that. But I asked myself, what's the minimum that we could raise that we would still do it anyway? So that was 50 grand. But a lot of people think with Kickstarter, you can just get accepted, put your Kickstarter up, and then money will come your way, which is so far from the truth. Kickstarter and other crowdfunding platforms are only as good as your social network. They will put up your page, and that's great. Kickstarter is great because people see Kickstarter and they understand crowdfunding and they trust Kickstarter, well, some of the time, and they will pledge and takes care of a lot of the logistics for you. But what Kickstarter won't do for you is promote, unless you're like 1 out of 10,000 that gets on their homepage or gets popular. How you do that is, of course, already having an audience. We were lucky enough that we already had an audience. We had a mailing list we could promote to. I had people who had seen me create educational content for the past 6 years at this point that sort of had heard my name before. And because of that, because we had the social capital, we were able to raise enough money here. And that did well for us. So you got to have social capital to do it. Well, I'm out of time. There's a lot more lessons that I learned along the way, which I'm probably going to put in another talk. So if you want to see that talk and you actually got through this whole thing, please let me know. If you have any questions, you want to hear about specific things next time I do this Founders Talk, let me know. But hopefully gave you some insight. I'm still trying to get rid of all the hats and learn even more lessons to make Code School even more successful. So, thank you for watching. See ya.